Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. I'm here with Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post as we're going to dissect from a big picture perspective the ugly 24-8 loss to the Eagles. That's 2 losses in a row. Some pretty bad football here the last couple weeks. As a reminder, you can subscribe to the John Conn Report wherever you get your podcast. On YouTube, it's at Empire Media. But you guys don't want to hear about that right now. But I have Nicki Jhabvala here. And Nicki, tell them, before we get into the dissection of all the ugliness, tell them where they can follow you.
At Twitter, at Nicki Jhabvala, or at WashingtonPost.com /sports.
There we go. Now we got the basics out of the way. Let's get to your anger. We know you got it. So we're going to try and let you know what happened, what's going on, and from a big picture perspective, what does this all mean? So, Nicki, let's start there. 2 weeks ago, you're at the stadium, you're leaving the stadium, and the people are in this great mood, and they're celebrating, and there's all these good vibes. 2 weeks later, where are we?
Steep drop from week one. From them going to that win, where they appear to show a dynamic offense, everybody thinks, things are finally starting to change. Here we go there it again. And even Ron says, guys bounced back. There was not, it felt like something was changing. They were utilizing all their weapons. Then you go to Detroit, everything collapses. It's an utter disaster. They have a second half rally that falls short. But you think this is a one-game fluke. It was that bad. You think this can only happen once. Sure enough, it happens again. Literally the same thing this week. Sacks, missed tackles, explosive plays, all the same things. They fall behind 24-0 at the half. And they didn't have a second half rally this time.
And you're facing a much better team. You can't do that stuff against the Eagles. 2 weeks in a row, though. Why do you think what do you think the reason is for the slow? I wouldn't even say slow start. Those are ugly stuff.
No start.
Yeah.
I think again, it's so many different issues that you can't pinpoint just one and put the blame on that and say, oh yeah, we can just fix this and we'll be better, right? I mean, the offensive line for protection, they can't establish the run game because they get behind so far so early. Missed tackles, explosive plays, the sacks. Oh my God, the sacks. So what is that like? 15 in 2 days. Yeah, it's insane. So they can't really get much of any offense going. And until they do, it's going to be the same thing over and over.
It is. It's the sacks and then also the big plays allowed. I mean, we'll get into that in a little bit, but I had this stat. I saw this after the game where I did some research, did a little homework.
Did a little Googling.
It's like 7 plays now of 40 yards or more. They allowed 12 all of last year. 12. For all the issues they had last year, they were better at preventing the big play. But let's stick on offense right now, because one of the things I'm wondering too, I don't know if you agree or not, but the run game, you brought it up, and you're right. I think last week against Detroit, I felt like you could have done a little bit earlier, but there were so many negative plays that they kept getting behind. But today they came out wanting to throw.
Yeah.
And I know, like last year, Scott Turner likes to, North Turner, his dad, at his core was he wanted to run the ball, but he also liked to get ahead with the pass, finish with the run. But I wonder if Scott Turner, sometimes last year, they kind of had that little gathering where said, got to run the ball more.
Yeah.
They have the weapons. Right. We all know that. But do they need to maybe try to do a little bit more in the run game earlier in games to at least stay ahead of the chains and get something going?
I think so. I was surprised they didn't try to establish it earlier, especially knowing the team they're going against. Philly wasn't particularly as strong against the run on defense. So, yeah, let alone after the second sack, at least. Now is when you really start to, and they had some success. They had some good runs, right, but they didn't stick with it. And before they knew it, the game got away from them, and they couldn't stick with it. I think Carson had 33 of his 43 attempts in the second half, so it was all passing.
And I don't want to blame it on the inability to run, but I do think the way this offense is going now, when I look at it, like, you need to have an alternative. And I felt like that last week too. There was nothing to fall back on. Do you think? Is that an offensive coordinator, or need to call it? Is that an offensive line? Is that needing Brian Robinson back?
Certainly having him back would help, no doubt. And what is that? Probably it's going to be at least 2 weeks, right? One more game after this. But yeah, I think some of it is play calling, especially early. I know a lot of OCs like to stick to that 15-play script. This is, again, one I thought they would come out running, given the circumstances. So, and I think the O-line can do a better job overall. I mean, I think the interior of the line, they lost Chase Roullier to, probably for the season, but, the guards, they've been worked over a little bit these last 2 games.
Are you surprised by that?
Yes and no. Not because of the players, nothing against Trey Turner or Andrew Norwell, but surprised only because this was a group that really held up well last year as they dealt with injuries and the coronavirus and so many other things. The offensive line, despite all their injuries and issues, really, held up well. And I credit a lot of coaching for that. So I thought you would kind of see a lot of the same this year since so many players returned, but so far it hasn't been the case, and that really shows you the value of guys like Brandon Sheriff and Eric Flowers had a really good season. So,
and that's the other thing, because my thought with the O-line was I like the depth, wasn't sure where the starters would be.
Right.
And maybe it's just that the depth, it's just there's a lot of equality throughout that 1 through 8 or whatever, but it doesn't. And I think the other thing that was disappointing today is Sam Cosmi got beat a few times around the end as well. Is this a group that, but we also know John Matsko, the line coach, probably the best position coach here. Is this a group that you feel can get it going in the right direction?
I think so. I mean, I think it's on them and Carson too. I think they need some time together. I think it's definitely possible to work out the kinks. We saw what they were in week 1. It's definitely possible. But I think the longer they lose, the more they lose in the fashion they did today and in week 2, it's going to become harder and harder.
And you're right. Like anytime there's that many sacks, it's not just on the offensive line. Although watching it, before we started taping, I went back and watched those 9 sacks again. It's a TV version, so you're not getting the full version. But there were probably a couple where I'd say Carson probably could have gotten rid of the ball quicker. There was one, I think it was a fumble play. The fumble play was the one because you have 2 guys underneath. It was Rodgers and Gibson. Short game, but it would have set up a 3rd and 2. Instead, it's a fumble because he's holding the ball a little bit long. So there were a couple like that. And I also thought the Eagles did a good job taking some of the shallow stuff away. There was one time it was a 3-step, or it's out of gun, I think 3-step. Shallow cross was covered. They know what was coming. So, but with Wentz, do you feel that is an area? I mean, this is what we heard about him, right?
Right. I mean, I think it is something. He admitted as much too post game that, there are times he's got to let go of the ball. It just puts undue stress on the offensive line, especially on the edges. There were clearly times when Charles Leno was holding up his guy well, but it takes a toll. You can only do that for so long. There's like a couple seconds where it works, and you got to let it go. So yeah, I think it's definitely an area where Carson Wentz can improve upon, and again, it's possible. There's proof it's possible.
Sure. Absolutely. I think the other thing with that, then it's pocket presence. Okay. Is that where do you think that was at?
Yeah, I think at times, and again, this is just watching from the press box, watching from afar, so you don't get the full details, and you certainly don't know the calls, but there are times where you felt like he could have stepped up in the pocket. There are times where you felt like, he stepped up, but maybe too late. So just the general awareness, it's like, you feel like sometimes he's not quite seeing the full picture there. So maybe that's something, maybe that's on the line. You kind of have to go back and watch, as Ron Rivera would say.
Is this part of the Wentz experience, or do you feel like, is this a 1-game blip here? Because he played well the first 2 games.
Right.
He played well.
No, I think again, it's a little bit of both. I mean, he is known to hold the ball a little too long. You're going to have the extremes in some games, right? The perfect deep pass followed by an interception. But I think the way these games have played out, and he hasn't played up to par, it just kind of snowballs.
And I think then the game gets away, and he also seemed like the one thing that also happens to any quarterback, you get that pressure, and you saw it there's a stretch there where it's like sped up.
Yeah.
Missing guys because you sped up a little bit, and that.
I think Carson Wentz under pressure is a very different quarterback from Carson Wentz with a clean pocket. I mean, as is any quarterback, let's be real, but I think it's especially noticeable with him.
And I would agree with that. And I think when he gets rolling, like we saw the second half last week, he can be really good.
Right.
But that requires everybody kind of starting to get going too, or helping out and receivers getting open. Do you think, we saw, like, we know these receivers are explosive.
Yeah.
And I think for both of us, you got to go back and be able to watch a different version of the game to see really what happened. Are you surprised, though? We know the protection issues, but are you surprised they weren't able to get these guys a little bit more involved earlier?
Yeah, a little bit, especially it being 2 games in a row now where Terry's not targeted until the 3rd quarter, which, again, game circumstances, you're getting sacked on every drive. It's a little difficult to get a pass off, let alone one to him. But it's, this is what they got to figure out. This is what they do. That's your top paid receiver. You got to give them the ball.
This episode is brought to you by Samsung. Unfold the all-new Galaxy Z Fold 4 and expand your world. With Flex Mode, it stands on its own, so you're hands-free to get more done during calls. And with multi-window view, you can use up to 3 apps at the same time. Plus, the edge-to-edge screen allows you to fully immerse yourself in your favorite games and shows. Visit Samsung.com to learn more about Galaxy Z Fold 4.
This episode is brought to you by DirecTV Stream. DirecTV Stream is your home for football this season because it's the best way to catch the games you won't want to miss. And with the DirecTV Stream Sports Hub, you can follow your favorite teams and track scores all in one place. That means more ways to follow the biggest hits, drives, and wins this season. So many you may need your own touchdown dance. So get your sports together and get your TV together at DirecTV.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
The NFL action is in full swing here at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. We're talking touchdowns, big plays, and even bigger wins. New customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win and get $200 in free bets if they do. And if that's not enough, everyone can boost their winnings with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. Right now, for every leg you add, you can boost your winnings up to 100%. With payouts bigger than ever, why bet on football anywhere else? To make things even sweeter, you can throw down on stepped-up same-game parlays once per game day all season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code KEIM, K-E-I-M, to get $200 in free bets if your team wins when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code KEIM, only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
What's the level of concern for you with this team right now?
Pretty high. I mean, again, it's only week 3, but you see the way they're losing. It's concerning, and the longer it goes on, you start to wonder at what point do you kind of lose the team? Do they get so frustrated that they're like, I'm done?
Is that because this is now year 3 that you feel like that?
Yeah, year 3, but this is what number quarterback over these 3 years? It's just kind of the endless cycle. And, I think with anybody would take a toll on them, and think it would with the fans too, So there's got to be some of that built up frustration. And, you just worry at a certain point, is it going to be too much to come back from?
And how important and again, I don't want to put everything on Carson Wentz because it wasn't, but he's a quarterback. And when you have a quarterback that can play well, your organization has a different level of hope. Right. So we're going to talk a lot about the quarterback for that reason. So, but with Wentz, how important will this week be for him bouncing back from that? And then as he said after the game, hey, you can't blame just the O-line on that one. There were a lot of things that I can do better. How important is this week for him from a leadership standpoint?
Oh, I think it's huge. I mean, I think everybody knows he hasn't played the greatest, certainly over these last 2 games. The team as a whole hasn't either, but if he can help them bounce back and overcome the adversity, that's incredibly big, especially going to Dallas to face a divisional rival. I'd like to think that Washington does have some advantage, so it didn't help them today, obviously. I mean, this will be the second time they faced a divisional rival on a short week, so they got to take advantage of that. But I think, whether it's fair or not, it always starts with the quarterback. That's the way it is.
And I think because again, we're looking at hope for future.
Right.
That's what people want to hear about too, and so that always comes back to the quarterback. But and then when if the line isn't holding up, and it does, then it affects his game, obviously. Defensively, though, what did they for the first half of that first half?
Yeah,
pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they had exactly. I thought they had some really good moments. I thought Benjamin St. Juice played pretty well, moving to outside in place of William Jackson. The run defense, which has kind of been their weakest link the last 2 games, they held them to only 71, 72 yards on the ground. But it's those explosive plays that just keep getting them. They can have, a solid, 45 minutes of play, but they give up those explosive plays. It doesn't even matter, I think they'd had 6 plays of 20 yards or more, I want to say.
I have the stuff right here. It's 1, 2, 3, 5 plays of 30 yards or more.
Yeah.
3 of 40 or more.
Yeah, that's insane. That's absolutely insane.
You can't win like that.
No, it's impossible. And, I haven't gone back to look at the specifics on each one, but, if it were like last week, it's communication issues, it's missed tackles, it's a combination of things that they keep saying every week. They just need to clean up. And
the other thing too that I wonder too, because we go back to the offensive line, and I think there was talk about the line going into the season about did they replace Sheriff and Flowers adequately enough? Conversely, corner depth. What did they do enough there? And you have Rashad Wildgoose as a slot corner. He was cut, and not that means you're a bad player automatically, because a lot of guys get cut and go on and do well. But that's where their depth is right now. And so what do you think about where that is at?
I think they need depth across the board. I mean, their D-line is beat up. The interior, had any of them gotten hurt, knock on wood, that would have been a disaster. Their linebackers, I feel like they need more help there. They have for the better part of 3 years, I think. But yeah, their secondary, they're getting thin. They're getting thin in like depth, but they also need a higher level starter quality at this point. And like you said with Wild Goose, is it's a tough circumstance to come in to start moving to the slot, and then to face a divisional rival at home. It's a big game. But I believe he gave up 40 yards and penalties with 2 PIs. Like, that's brutal.
And at least like with the defensive line, they had some depth, but then you lose Smith Williams, you lose Toohill, you lose Daniel Wise.
You lose your first and second level. Yeah.
Right. So you're not expecting to have that. Like when you're in that situation, the problem that I have with corner is the depth was bad in the offseason and in training camp. And now that's where I have an issue.
Right. No, and I agree with you. And I always felt like they're, if everything were perfect, everybody were healthy, they'd have a pretty good starting group. But you lose 1, 2, 5, 6. I mean, that's it. In a lot of positions, starter to backup can be a steep drop. And, I think in past years it felt more seamless, but not this year.
I think because one thing that Ron Rivera's talked about too is there's youth. And I know people don't want to hear that because for Ron Rivera, this is third year. For these fans who follow his team, it's year 20 plus.
Decade 3.
It's year 20 plus, right? Decade 3 for 3 years. But when you do see that, is that valid in some cases? Derek Forrest, second year, St. Juice, second year. Who was the other one? I'm missing somebody else who was young. Jamin Davis, second year.
Yeah.
Is that a legitimate thing, or is that? I mean, should there be? Is the growing pains a legitimate thing, or is it being maybe used to obscure things a little bit?
I think it's legitimate in some areas, but I also fall back on the truth that that's the case for every team. You bring in new players, young players, draft picks. You're gonna have some rookies, some second-year players in starting positions. I think at this point, maybe not for the rookies, but I do think they have a good number of veterans. I mean, he keeps talking about having 10 offensive linemen with considerable experience. So they are pretty veteran up front. They have a veteran quarterback, their defensive line, 2 veterans in John Allen and Deron Payne. Not on, one's not on a second contract, but they've been in the league for a while. I mean, Kendall Fuller, veteran, Bobby McKean, veteran, William Jackson, veteran,
Cam Curls, he's young, but he's a vet.
Right, exactly. So I don't think it's all youth at this point. I think it's other things.
What, like what?
Just cleaning up mistakes and just doing the things they've been talking about every week.
And obviously, a lot gets put on coaches, and people want Del Rio's head on a platter. They want this guy. They want this guy for another guy for. Where are you at with all that? Because I don't know. Where are you at?
My thing is always, if you're going to do this, what are you going to do next? If you get rid of Del Rio, all right, who's calling plays for the defense? Who's on this staff to call plays for this defense? I don't know anybody that's done it, right? So unless Ron's going to take that on.
I don't think Ron wants to take that on.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's always a if this, then what clause. So I think in the off season, if this season continues the way it has, I think you certainly need to look at a bigger change. And there may be one, whether it's voluntary or not for this group, but Mid-season right now, will that actually make the defense better? Who's going to be calling the plays? To me, it's just kind of, doesn't make sense.
And one thing we know too is his teams have gotten better historically throughout the second half.
Yeah.
What do you see those? I mean, is it way too early to see the signs and know which way this is going to go?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's still early. It's week 3. For a lot of these guys, some of these guys are playing their first games as Commanders still, so yeah, it's still early. They got plenty of time left to turn it around. You just hope, again, that it doesn't snowball and become out of control.
And then the other thing too, defensively, staying there, is it 1 turnover in 3 games?
Yes.
And it was the thrown up for grabs Trevor Lawrence pass.
Yes.
So and I guess they came close to a couple last week, but it really, that's another thing. There's been no ability to change field positions, change momentum at that side of the ball. Do you feel like they have, Montez Sweat, we keep waiting for him to bust out, and he seems to be,
he's getting pressure. It's just, it's not going home yet.
Right. And you weren't here when Preston Smith was here, but Preston Smith was the master of being a step away. Montez has been about 6 inches away or 8 inches away, closer than a step. But do they have the playmakers? Do they have playmakers on this defense to maybe help get this turned around like that?
I think so. I think it's up front. They do, again, if they can stay healthy. I think Daron Payne is having a heck of a season. It goes unnoticed because of the way they're finishing, and just, stats don't always reflect it. But I think he's having a heck of a season. I think John Allen gets home a fair amount. Montez, I think he's generating pressure, but then he'll have a mistake here or there that kind of trumps the good things he does. You'd like to hope that in having Chase Young back whenever he comes back, that can bolster the group. But again, I look at last season, it wasn't that great when all 4 of them were in it. Maybe more. I don't know. You just hope for something different. But I do think they have playmakers. I think Kendall is more incapable of, coming away with, turnovers here and there. I thought St. Juice played well. I think guys like Derek Forrest and Cam Curl, they have that ability all the time. It's just, can they put everything together to create those opportunities?
ABC Sunday.
Your favorite stars are ready for their close-up when Celebrity Jeopardy comes to prime time. Hosted by me, Mayim Bialik.
America's favorite quiz show is looking to the stars.
It's the OG Jeopardy with celebrities. The brightest one will win $1 million for charity. Let's hope they've been reading more than screenplays.
Mayim Bialik hosts Celebrity Jeopardy. Series premieres Sunday, 8/7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
On a beautiful run through the park on a pleasant day, you can easily get lost.
No. She didn't kill him.
Huh? In your true crime podcast.
It was the pool guy. So obvious.
Whatever motivates you works for us. It's all about letting your run be your run. And Brooks is here for every runner, doing the research and sweating the details to create gear that works for you. It's your run. Brooks, run happy.
You saw Brian Robinson before the game. We've seen him out of practice.
Yeah.
Do you think, we don't know for sure when he's coming back, but he's looking pretty good.
Yeah, I think I feel like I was this with, I'm not a doctor, I don't know. But the fact that he's on the field, that he's running route set, he is very obviously progressed each time we've seen him out there. To me, that gives me hope that he can come back immediately. How much he'll play immediately, I don't know, but you think about Chase Young coming back from his ACL, different injury, different circumstances. He's going to need a ramp up period. Whereas Brian Robinson is getting on the field now. Will that limit his ramp up period? Will we get him back sooner? That would be the hope there.
And the funny thing is, in just a couple more minutes here, but looking at the team, you don't want to make too much of one game. You don't want to go down the road of oh my God, I still think Carson Wentz has done a mostly good job. In the first game, good. Second half last week, really good. Today, a bad day for the entire offense. But so you don't want to go down the road of this was the emblematic of what all is going to happen. But I also wonder if it had looked a little bit more even last week. They had the score was the same, but maybe not that ugly first half, which is in the back of the people's minds. But what are your signs for I want to say signs for hope, but signs to say hey, this could happen. This, there's this, there's still this.
I mean, to me, it just all goes back to week one. We saw what they could be. Yes, it was against the Jaguars, but still, they showed some flashes of, how dynamic they can be on offense and using their very playmakers. I thought Wentz looked very solid in that game. The O-line held up. The defense had some mistakes, but overall it wasn't too bad. So yeah, I think that proof was there. And I think even in these games, you see flashes, Wentz will throw a beautiful deep ball, or, you'll have one great running catch by, Curtis Samuel, Terry, or Dotson. But it's always been about consistency for this team. Still is, apparently.
It is. And, you look at those, you brought up Curtis Samuel, Dotson, McLaurin, they're still talented. They're not. So like those guys and Logan Thomas getting back healthier. When Brian Robinson gets back out there, it changes some of what they can do on offense, and you get the power back in there and gives them more split out. And, defensively, to me, a big thing is get healthy, but then you need to get like the Cole Holcombs and Jamin playing really consistent, but you need to get healthy just to become,
right.
Okay.
Right. No, I totally agree. I mean, and the more injuries there are, especially up front, I mean, you're just stressing your guys on the interior, and they're the best you got right now. So the more plays that John Allen plays that he doesn't need to play or wouldn't be playing had, somebody else been healthy, to me, that's what ultimately hurts, because it's only week 3. What's he going to feel like in 10 weeks,
Right. And last thing, we've both been around covering this league a while. So when again, because it is year 3 and there are, they haven't had great success, obviously. At what point do you worry with players? It's too early for players to lose confidence. There's way too much. There's 14 games left. But is that in the back of your head at all? Like, how long will they stick?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, especially for the ones who have been here longer, who have experienced the turnover of quarterbacks and play callers and, experienced some of the same losses the same way. Guys like, I don't ever think Terry would get like this, but, it takes a toll on you mentally. And, I think for even the young guys who don't really understand how long an NFL season can seem, if you keep losing like this, it's, guys are not checked out. I don't think this team has ever checked out, but it becomes much harder to win and make it feel like there's value in that if you've, already been cut out.
And the funny thing is, if they go down to Dallas and win, life just looks a little bit different. That's how
they're a team on the rise if that happens. It's amazing how quick life changes.
There you go. So Nicki, thanks a lot for joining me, and thank you for tuning in. As always, I'll be back on Tuesday night with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein, in our live YouTube show. You know what? It's a therapy Tuesday, folks. And again, there are no bills, and you can bring your ranch and your venom, and we'll talk about it on the air. So check us out there, 7:30 Eastern Time, Tuesday, Empire Media, AMP. IRE, thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.